Welcome to the deep dive. You listening to this right now, you're probably feeling the intense pressure of the current tech landscape.
Oh, absolutely. It's pretty overwhelming out there.
Right, because every single day there's a new headline about artificial intelligence. Every competitor in your industry is claiming they are, completely revolutionizing their business with it. But if we're looking really closely and being completely honest here, very few organizations are actually seeing a massive transformational return on that investment.
Yeah, most of them are they're just treading water.
Exactly.
I mean, the gap between the breathless hype of what these tools can supposedly do and the actual measurable impact on an enterprise's bottom line, it is staggering right now. We're seeing a ton of motion, but very, very little actual forward progress.
Which really brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to move right past all that flashy hype of AI experimentation.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, we want to figure out the actual structural blueprint for genuine enterprise-wide integration. And to do that, we are looking at a highly regarded March 2026 article by J.D. Parashar. He's the founder and director of ReThynk AI Innovation and Research.
Right.
And his piece is titled The 5 Layers of Successful Enterprise AI Integration. Plus, to make sure we aren't just stuck in the ivory tower of theory, we're also bringing in some highly revealing and frankly pretty blunt comments from industry practitioners who responded to his framework over on LinkedIn.
Which is great because it is a phenomenal stack of sources. It really bridges that gap between the high-level executive strategy and the gritty, on-the-ground reality of trying to actually make these systems work.
Totally. And to set the stage for why this is so difficult, think about those incredible videos you see online of a fully automated smart home.
Oh, yeah, where everything just sort of happens by magic.
Right. The lights dim to the perfect level based on the time of day. The ambient music swells right as you walk through the front door. The coffee machine starts brewing the exact moment your alarm goes off. I mean, it feels completely effortless. It actively anticipates you.
Because the environment has become proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah.
The technology is entirely invisible because it's baked right into the physical architecture of the house.
Right. But imagine buying that exact same state-of-the-art smart home system, taking all those shiny touchscreens and sensors out of the box, and then trying to install them in a farmhouse built in the 1800s.
Oh, man. That's a nightmare.
A house that literally does not have electrical wiring behind the plaster. It doesn't matter how advanced the software is. You can stick those touchscreens on the wall all day long, but you are literally just gluing glass to wood. The physical architecture of the environment actively resists the technology.
It just becomes an incredibly expensive decoration at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
And, Parashar argues that this is the exact trap that most companies are stuck in today. He actually diagnoses it as pilot purgatory.
Pilot purgatory. I love that term.
Right? Because companies have these successful little pilot programs. They've clearly identified some use cases. They've even bought the massive enterprise licenses and deployed the tools to their teams. Yet the enterprise-wide impact remains, well, virtually zero.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because treating enterprise AI as just a standard software installation, it's kind of like buying a Formula One race car, but forcing it to drive in rush hour traffic on a deeply rutted dirt road.
That is a great way to look at it.
I mean, the machine itself is a marvel of engineering. It can do over 200 miles an hour, but the environment you've placed it in simply isn't built to handle that kind of kinetic energy. The suspension's going to shatter, the tires will instantly degrade, and ultimately you aren't going to get to work any faster than if you just rode a bicycle.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how often organizations confuse activity with direction. Parashar points out that leadership teams almost universally treat AI integration merely as a systems upgrade.
Just an IT ticket.
Exactly.
Right.
They see their employees logging into the new platform. They see thousands of prompts being written every week. They look at that flurry of daily activity, and they mistakenly think, oh, this is genuine integration.
They treat it like they are just pushing a new version of Microsoft Word to everyone's laptop.
Which is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the technology itself. AI isn't just a tool you hold in your hand to do a task slightly faster. When you deploy it at the enterprise level, AI actually touches how decisions are made, how human beings interact with each other, how workflows physically route through an office, and how the company ultimately creates value.
It changes the whole system.
Right. It alters the operational DNA. And to successfully integrate something that fundamental, Parashar argues, companies have to stop looking at the software first and instead align their entire organizational structure across 5 specific layers.
Okay, so if the software itself isn't the starting line, we have to zoom out. We need to transition from the tools to the underlying purpose, the why and the who.
Exactly. Layer one.
Right. Before a company writes a single line of code or buys a single license, Parashar demands they establish a rigid strategic anchor. AI has to be tied directly to a specific business advantage, not just a vague desire to, look innovative to shareholders.
Yeah, organizations have to ask the really hard, uncomfortable questions here.
Yeah.
Like, what specific strategic advantage are we actually seeking?
Right.
Are we trying to cut operational costs by 30%? Or are we trying to accelerate our research and development cycle?
Mm.
How does this specific AI deployment align with where we want our market positioning to be 5 years from now?
I have to push back on this a little bit, though, because if you read the headlines today, we are dealing with machine learning models that can process more historical market data in a single second than a human executive could read in a lifetime.
Or they are incredibly powerful.
So if an AI is genuinely that powerful, shouldn't it be the thing defining the strategy for us? Shouldn't it be finding the hidden patterns in the market that our human brains literally cannot see? Like, why are we forcing a rigid, human-defined strategy onto an intelligence that might be vastly superior at spotting trends?
Well, I get that. That is a very common argument in tech circles right now, but it is a really dangerous misconception for a business to operate under.
Yeah.
AI is a phenomenal enabler of direction, but is not the creator of it.
Really?
Yeah. You have to understand the mechanism of how these models actually work. Think of the algorithm like a highly efficient engine. It has massive horsepower. But if you don't steer the vehicle toward a specific predefined destination, that engine will just drive you in circles very, very quickly.
Ah, because it doesn't have human context.
Precisely. And AI can forecast a market trend based on historical data, but it doesn't understand your company's unique risk appetite. It doesn't understand the nuance of your brand reputation or the fact that you might actually want to take a short-term loss right now just to build long-term customer loyalty.
It just looks at the numbers.
Right. Without human-defined strategic outcomes acting as the guardrails, and AI will just optimize for whatever metric is easiest to measure.
Yeah.
And that usually just creates highly efficient busy work rather than actual competitive advantage.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if the humans have to set that destination, it means you have to fundamentally map out who makes the calls. It forces a company to build what Parashar essentially calls a decision architecture. That's layer 2.
Yes, the decision layer.
You have to draw a hard, definitive line in the sand regarding where human judgment remains absolutely essential and where the machine is allowed to actually take the wheel.
And that architecture is exactly what prevents catastrophic cascading errors. Let's look at how this works mechanically in the real world. Imagine a major banking system using AI for fraud detection.
Okay.
The system spots a highly unusual, massive transaction flagged at 2 in the morning. Does the AI have the authority to automatically freeze the client's entire account, potentially ruining a legitimate international business deal?
Oh, wow.
Right. Or is the architecture designed so the AI simply routes that flagged data, along with a probability score, to a human investigator who makes the final call?
So you aren't just letting the machine run wild, you are actively designing it to enhance the human leadership rather than replacing it. You have to decide the routing of that authority before you ever plug the intelligence in.
Exactly. Because if you don't map out that accountability beforehand, the moment the AI makes a mistake, entire departments will spend weeks just pointing fingers at each other because nobody knows who is supposed to be supervising the algorithm.
All right, so let's walk this forward. The C-suite has done their job. The strategy is set, the decision makers are clearly defined, the boundaries of authority are locked in. But how does the actual messy day-to-day work get done? We need to move from the high-level thinking of the executives to the doing on the factory floor or the office cubicle.
This is layer 3, the process layer. And this is where theoretical plans usually crash violently into reality.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Yeah, because AI requires highly structured environments to function. Workflows must be rigidly standardized. The inputs and outputs of every single daily task must be documented, and all ambiguity in how a job is executed has to be removed entirely.
Because algorithms absolutely despise ambiguity.
He despises it. And we need to understand why. A human being is incredibly good at inferring social context. If a manager sends a vague email saying, "Get this report to me ASAP," a human employee knows that ASAP actually means by Friday afternoon, because they know the manager is leaving for a vacation on Friday evening.
Right?
They use unwritten social context to fill in the gaps of a broken or vague workflow.
But a machine learning model doesn't know the boss is going to Cabo.
Exactly. The AI lacks all of that social context. If a workflow relies on unwritten human assumptions or undocumented favors between departments or just vague instructions, the AI will either halt entirely, guess incorrectly, or trigger an endless loop of automated errors.
There is a quote from Parashar in the source material that I think is the most memorable distillation of this entire deep dive. He writes, AI amplifies process quality. If processes are weak, AI amplifies inefficiency.
It's so
If you are
relevant.
listening to this right now, think about your own company's internal approval process. Picture your own messy inbox or your chaotic Slack channels. If your process for approving a new marketing budget involves like 3 unread emails, a forgotten text message, and a verbal agreement in the hallway.
Adding AI doesn't fix that system.
No. It just automates the chaos at lightning speed. It's like putting a mega amplifier on a garage band that doesn't actually know how to play their instruments.
Yeah.
Suddenly, they aren't just hitting the wrong notes. They are deafeningly, disruptively hitting the wrong notes at a stadium volume.
That's a terrifying thought.
If the underlying process is broken, the AI will just execute that broken process 1,000 times faster than a human ever could.
Which brings us to a massive structural bottleneck. Layer 4. Let's say a company listens to this. They map their strategy and they completely streamline their processes. The band finally knows how to play the song. We still have to ask, can the AI actually access the sheet music it needs to perform?
The data.
The data and technology layer. According to Parashar, this is usually the most visible hurdle for a company. It involves your data quality, your system integration, and whether you have scalable cloud infrastructure.
Right.
The foundational unavoidable truth here is that without strong, clean, and accessible data, an AI simply cannot deliver reliable outcomes. It will hallucinate, it will guess, or it will just fail to run.
And this is exactly where the source material gets a little spicy.
Oh yeah, the comments.
Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to look at how actual IT practitioners reacted to Parashar's framework. Over in the LinkedIn comments, there was a highly compelling counter-perspective from a user named Master Vantage. They argued that this data and technology requirement is actually the one element that will completely bankrupt all the other grand plans.
Yeah, it grounds all of this high-level organizational theory in some pretty brutal technical reality. Master Vantage's argument is that your brilliant strategy, your meticulously mapped out decisions, and your perfectly streamlined processes will absolutely fall apart if the data is trapped behind a wall of legacy systems.
And I want to translate what they mean by that because we hear terms like brittle, hand-coded integrations a lot in tech circles. If you aren't an engineer, what that practically means is that, like 15 years ago, a guy named Dave wrote a custom piece of code to make the sales software talk to the accounting software.
We all know a Dave.
Right. But Dave left the company a decade ago. Now, nobody actually knows how that code works, and if you try to update the system, the whole thing crashes. So the company's most valuable historical data is essentially being held hostage in a digital basement.
And if you think about this mechanistically, imagine the AI is the world's fastest speed reader. It can read 1,000,000 pages a minute, but it is standing in a library where every single book is written in a different language, half the books are locked in a vault, and there is no card catalog.
It's useless.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how fast the AI can read if it can't find or translate the data. You can spend millions of dollars building the perfect enterprise strategy, but if the AI physically cannot pull the sales data from 2022 to compare it with the supply chain costs of 2025, your strategy is dead on arrival.
Master Vantage actually pitched a solution in their comment, advocating for modern platforms that essentially learn the data languages of these old legacy systems to automate the integration process itself. And, whether you buy into their specific software solution or not, the underlying point creates a really fascinating tension with Parashar's original article.
It does, because Parashar says all 5 organizational layers must align perfectly. But the practitioner on the ground says, sure, but if the data architecture fails, it actively destroys the other steps. You have to remove the technical bottleneck to free the data first, otherwise the C-suite is just strategizing about a fantasy.
All right, so let's assume a company actually pulls off a miracle here. They crack the data problem, they have the cutting-edge cloud tech, they have beautifully clean and accessible data acting as a single source of truth. Their processes are perfectly streamlined, and their strategy is bold.
The perfect algorithmic machine.
Exactly, they've built it. But there's one final, entirely invisible barrier that determines if anyone actually presses the go button.
Layer 5. culture and governance. Parashar notes that this is the most frequently overlooked dynamic in enterprise tech, but it is undoubtedly the most critical because it is entirely human.
Right.
It involves building genuine trust in the systems and requiring leadership to actually have AI literacy so executives understand the mechanisms they are approving.
This raises an important question, though. What happens when the strategy, the process, and the data are absolutely perfect, but the human workforce simply does not trust the output?
Then the entire multi-million-dollar investment just grinds to a halt. Parashar warns that without managing the human culture, adoption immediately slows. Resistance increases dramatically.
Because people are creatures of habit.
Right. If they don't trust the new system, they will actively find creative ways to bypass the AI, to do things the old, manual way, just to feel safe.
We actually have another comment from the source material that perfectly validates this human element.
Yeah.
A practitioner named Rayleigh Sungahid shared their real-world experience from working at a company called Lifewood.
Yeah, that was a great injection of reality into the theory. At Lifewood, they found that blending data readiness with what we call change management is exactly what prevents the massive integration delays most teams face.
And just to define change management for a second, I mean, it sounds like standard corporate jargon, but it's literally just the psychological work of convincing your staff that this new robot isn't here to fire them.
Exactly.
You have to manage the human psychology of the transition just as rigorously as you manage the data pipelines. If your employees are terrified the AI is going to make their specific role obsolete, they won't just ignore the tool, they will subtly sabotage the integration by dragging their feet on training or just refusing to feed it good data. You have to win their trust or the machine starves.
And bringing all of this together requires what Parashar calls a CXO lens. The core thesis we extract from all these sources is that success requires simultaneous alignment.
Across all 5 layers.
Yes, the strategic anchor, the decision architecture, the rigid processes, the clean data, and the human culture. If even one single component is weak, the entire integration struggles. It is not an IT project. It is a massive organizational design challenge.
So what does this all mean? For you, listening to this, thinking about your own career, your own team, and your own company struggles with new tech, it means we have been asking the wrong questions in our boardrooms. The real question to ask your leadership isn't, have we implemented AI tools?
Because the answer to that is probably yes.
Right, and as we've seen, that means nothing. The real question is, have we integrated intelligence into how our organization truly operates? Have we stripped the house down to the studs and actually installed the wiring?
And, looking at that fully wired house leaves us with a fascinating broader implication. Parashar wrote another piece mentioned in our sources, bearing the headline, "Competitive Advantage is Now Algorithmic." Think about what happens if a company actually achieves everything we've discussed today. If a business perfectly aligns all those components to operate as a single, highly efficient algorithmic system, what happens to human intuition?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy question.
Right. If every process is rigidly standardized to remove ambiguity, and every single decision is mapped out in a predefined architecture, does perfect integration leave any room for the messy, rule-breaking gut feelings that have historically driven some of humanity's greatest innovations? If the corporate system becomes perfectly intelligent and hyper-efficient, is there any room left for human genius to break the rules? That is a profound question I think every leader needs to deeply explore on their own as they build these systems.
It really makes you wonder if we are building the perfect automated house only to realize we've designed an environment where we are no longer allowed to rearrange the furniture.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for joining us to unpack this today. Keep questioning the systems around you. Keep pushing for clarity in your own work.